This story is fictional. The characters in the story are also fictional, and any similarity to persons living or dead is coincidental. The author does feel, however, that what takes place in this book could very easily happen in real life. The first statement, well, that's pretty standard in works of fiction. But the second, the person who wrote this book really thinks that what the book is about isn't just fiction. It could really happen. The book is called Joshua, Father Joseph Girzone. Thank you, Father Girzone. You really believe it could happen? What this story says could really happen?
I think it really could happen. I think at odd times throughout history, I think possibly under different circumstances and in different ways, perhaps it may have happened a number of occasions.
Well, let me tell you what I think could happen. You're quite a meddler here. Religion is not finely chiseled doctrines of rigid codes of behavior, it says in page 184. And slipping back a few pages earlier, we find some things that are equally devastating. Comments regarding the simplicity of life that is necessary to have true religious faith. Here he is at the Vatican, of all places. This character, Joshua, saying he's Jesus, saying, why do people try so hard to reproduce heaven on earth and have such a difficult time absorbing the message of the stable? They find more meaning in representing God's majesty and find more comfort in being surrounded by power and magnificence than in living the simplicity of the real message. Now, these types of statements I just quoted, Father, don't they get you in a lot of trouble?
No.
No?
Surprisingly.
Well, I am surprised you haven't gotten in a lot of trouble for saying things like this. Why haven't you?
I don't know. It's a mystery. I had to give a talk at the parish, one parish. The priest there was the pastor there was the president of the Canon Law Society in America. And he's also the chief judge in the diocesan tribunal here in our diocese. And I said to him after the talks, I said, how come canon lawyers in the church, in different dioceses, they love Joshua so much? I thought they would be upset with it. And he said, Joe, he said, we all realize, probably more than anybody, the changes that really should be made. But where do you start? And when we read Joshua, it was so refreshing because it gave everybody a whole new way of looking at things and gave us hope. And so we love it, so keep going.
Now, for the people who don't know what we're all talking about, we're talking about a couple of books here. Joshua, A Parable for Today by Father Joseph Girzone, and the newer book, Joshua and the Children, A Parable. These are both best-selling books. These are not hidden in a corner somewhere. This light is not under a bushel. It is on a hilltop, shining all over the world, hundreds of thousands of copies in print. And this is a publishing phenomenon. Before we get into the content of these books, for those who may not be familiar with them, let's go back, Father Girzone, to the story within the story. I know you've told it hundreds of times. Please, one more time for the people who don't know what this parish priest was doing, sitting in the middle of nowhere, writing a book.
Well, I had to retire about 7-8 years ago because of my health. The doctor told me that if I didn't get away from parish work, I probably wouldn't live the year out, which may seem sort of strange since we have a reputation for working only one day a week. So I had to retire. And I had felt a pressure to write, as if God was prodding me, and I kept resisting it because I had never written. I wrote a little an allegory at one time about 8 years ago. 9 years ago, and that still is my favorite book, Carol the Lonely Falcon. But that was the only thing I had ever written. But I felt this pressure to write, to get out of my system. What I really felt was the simple, crystal clear message of Jesus. Because I felt that the churches, all of our various denominations, had just taken the message of Jesus and distorted it in different ways so that the clear, beautiful Jesus wasn't coming through. And so I felt a need. I didn't know how much longer I was going to live, so I felt a need to accomplish the one thing that I felt my life was created for, and that was to be a vehicle of the simple message of Christ. And so I decided to write what I had felt all during my years as a priest, what Jesus was really trying to teach, and which was lost in the course of the centuries.
Now, you went from this parish priest headed for a stroke to the simple life to now all of a sudden being a kind of media religious superstar, a couple of dozen requests for movie rights, hundreds of thousands of copies in print. Are you on your way back to another stroke now? How have you handled all of the pressure that's come, ironically, with the success of something that came from isolation and seclusion?
That's the mystery. It's not easy. I have to take 6 times the amount of blood pressure pills that I had to take ever since Joshua came out. And it's tough. But I just have to learn to keep things simple, that's all. What? And spend more time just being alone.
Now, tell us the story about how this book came into being, because writers such as myself, used to dealing with publishers, advances, contracts, lawyers, hardbound, softbound, foreign rights, trade paper, percentages. For you, it was much more simple than that, wasn't it?
It was. I couldn't get a publisher because, first of all, it's difficult to get a publisher if you're an unknown, and I was a total unknown. And I didn't have the money even to make copies of the manuscripts. So I went to a printer and asked the printer how much it would cost to have the book printed and how long he would give me to pay the bill. And so that's what I ended up doing, having printed myself and then just bringing copies with me when I gave talks or gave retreats. And what happened then is just very casually the book started to circulate. People would buy copies at retreats or at talks that I would give and would send copies to relatives and friends in various parts of the country and over in Europe and up in Canada. And before long, we started getting requests for copies from different parts of the country, graduates from all over the country. And after about 3 years, I think, we were selling something like 1,000 copies a week.
Isn't it
phenomenal? Yeah.
Isn't it retrospectively, though, maybe the way it kind of had to be? Suppose this manuscript had fallen into the hands of a high-powered publisher who had looked it over and laid some expansive contract in front of you, negotiating movie rights, advances, royalty percentages, and all this kind of stuff right up front. It seems to me very much in keeping with the way it happened, the message of the book, that out of simplicity comes beauty, out of humbleness comes peace and love.
Possibly, it's the way it worked, and I'm happy it worked that way. It was fun. I know the first 4 years I was really penniless. Some days I didn't even have money to buy food, and it was really a tough struggle. Now, it was the happiest time of my life. I had to really practice what I preached.
Now, the disciples went fishing, and they got a couple of coins out of the mouth of a fish. Right. You found a couple of bills laying folded by the side of the highway. Tell us about that.
That was interesting. Well, I was, what was it? Well, it was one morning I was taking a walk down the back road, not too far from where I live, and I was wondering what I was going to do for supper because I didn't have any money. And as I walked along, and this was way out in the middle of nowhere, I thought I saw something in the ditch on the side of the road. Looked like some money. But I said, what would money be doing way out here in this godforsaken place? So the closer I walked to it, the more it looked like some money in a couple of bills. So I bent down in the ditch, and sure enough, there were some bills folded up, neatly folded up in this ditch, way out in the middle of nowhere. So I picked it up and opened it up, and sure enough, just enough money for supper that night. It was almost as if God was saying to me, I told you not to worry, you darn fool, I take care of you.
Did God do it?
Pardon?
Did God do it?
Who knows?
Who knows?
I'm sure that you never know. But I'm sure that somebody didn't just go out there and neatly fold up a couple of bills and put it in the ditch. But God takes care of us in His own way. Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow, they don't reap, they don't gather into barns. And I think every one of us, so frequently during our lives, see so many coincidences taking place that it's hard to believe that they are just mere coincidences.
Let's come back to a quote I gave earlier. through the words of Joshua, who is Jesus in the book. Religion is not finely chiseled doctrines and rigid codes of behavior. What's the message?
Jesus was very familiar with a legalistic approach to religion in his own day, and highly structured religious concepts. And yet he chose a very, very simple approach to his Father. He chose a very simple way to God. You will worship neither in this temple nor in Jerusalem, but you will worship the Father in the sincerity of your lives and the way you live. And so Jesus taught beautiful ideas, had a beautiful vision of life, which he tried to share with us. In the course of centuries, with all the religious wars there were, all the various denominations began to develop these very highly crystallized concepts that you could put into a catalog and have your members memorize. And that's what we've done to these beautiful, life-giving teachings of Jesus, this beautiful vision of Jesus. Like Jesus shared with us his Father. Mm-hmm. He shared with us his Spirit. He was sharing with us his inner life, and told us that when we accept him as our friend, he and his Father and his Spirit come and live within us as our friend, as our companion, as our comforter, as our guide, as our constant companion. So this was a beautiful sharing of his inner life. We've taken that, reduced it to theological concepts, which we call the Holy Trinity. And you can read about these concepts in a book, in a theology book. And you can memorize these things, and you can be totally committed to these things that you memorize in a theology book or in a catechism. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you live them or that they become the guide of your life. So we can become intellectually very good Catholics, or very good Presbyterians, or very good Baptists, or very good Orthodox, or whatever, and never really reaching the point where we become really committed Christians.
You know, you are Catholic, a Catholic priest, and there are certain Catholic overtones, but you don't really let anybody off the hook. I mean, there are bad Presbyterians and bad Episcopalians and bad Catholics in your book. You don't let anybody off the hook here, do you?
No, I think we all get a share of the blame. As one guy said, God, you don't discriminate, do you, Father? You give it to us all.
Now, you also have Joshua, Jesus saying in here, and speaking of the Catholic viewpoint, that God doesn't give all priests the gift of celibacy. This is pretty typical of this Joshua, Jesus, you have in your books. He really, to use biblical terminology, is kicking against the pricks, so to speak. He really is overturning some apple carts, and I guess I just can't believe you've gotten off so easy. Maybe fiction's the way. Let somebody else say it for you, huh?
Yeah, well, it's they realize that something has to be done. My greatest supporters are bishops, which is surprising. There was one Vatican official that read the book at a friend of his house. The Vatican official was a priest, and the friend was a layperson. The layperson didn't like the book at all because he was very conservative. And this Vatican official took it to bed with him one night, and the next morning he said, my gosh, he said, I really love that book. He said, you did? He said, yeah. He said, that was the most beautiful, gave me the most beautiful sense of Jesus that I've ever read in my life. And the beautiful thing about it, it's readable. So that was a Vatican official.
Now,
so I don't know how it touches people. It seems to make people realize that, we have really departed from the beautiful, simple message of Jesus. Maybe it's time to try to get back to simplicity again.
Your book, Joshua and the Children, one has a sense reading it, it's Belfast. 1989 or 1990. Is there any intended allegories here? You know, you read through this. Here's this, the Reverend John Maislin, and I'm thinking Ian Paisley. There are a lot of reference points here. Is that deliberate, or is it just incidental?
Well, what I try to do is I realize that religious conflicts are things that crop up continually in history, and it's paradoxical. Seeing people supposedly totally committed to God, destroying each other, hating one another in the name of God, it's so contradictory. I felt that since that's such a common thing through history, I figure, why not take a situation, and it wasn't really intended to be any specific situation, although it does seem rather pointedly Northern Ireland, but I wanted it to be more general. That's why I didn't be more specific in the book, so that people could apply the messages and the parable to a lot of different situations in southern Africa, South Africa, or on the Holy Land, or in Russia, where you have people now, different religions fighting and killing each other, all in the name of God. It doesn't make sense. And so what I try to do is make the parable rather general rather than specific, because if I made it specific, then it might have political overtones rather than the message of forgiveness, which I really wanted to get across.
One certainly is reminded of the words, "Suffer the little children come unto me, for such is the kingdom of God," because in this particular book, the real heroes are children.
And I think that's the way the problem is going to be settled.
Why did you present it that way? Is it because we must, as Christ said, all again become as little children to truly enter into the kingdom of God? Is that what we've got to do, to set aside all of our prejudices, our political bigotries?
It's hard for grown-ups who have already been infected with prejudice and hostilities and suspicions to heal very, very deep-seated wounds like that. I think it would be much easier for children.
You know, I was listening earlier today to an interview on national television with Mr. Naisbitt, who wrote Megatrends and has another new book out in regards to that. And he said, in reference to his best-selling books, that he didn't say anything that people didn't really know. He said one of the biggest criticisms he gets, that people say, well, you know, we all read the New York Times, you know, we all read Time magazine, we know all this stuff, you're not telling us anything new. And he said, yeah, but the reason the book sold is because I did kind of tell you again what you already knew. And reading your books, one has a sense of maybe that's the success. I mean, we're supposed to already know what's there, the simplicity, love, peace, all the trappings aside, just the simple message that Christ taught. And we're all kind of supposed to know this. Is this what you did? Did you just kind of tell it to us again and remind us, nudge us along the way a little?
That's about it. I think everybody in their heart senses what Jesus really expects and what Jesus was really like. But there have been so many complicated, extraneous factors that have been thrown into the stew that it's hard to just take out the essence. So what I try to do with all the complicated stew that has been developed through the centuries, I try to take out the essence. And once you take out the essence, and people say, oh, yeah, it was there all the time, but you just couldn't see it with all the other stuff there.
One of the things about your book is that it's short on theology, long on practicality. You don't really talk about the incarnation. You don't really seek to resolve the issue of when he was God, when he was man, which part was which, acting when, where, and how.
I assumed a lot.
Yeah.
What I didn't want to do, I didn't want to write the New Testament all over again. I didn't want to write a salvation history book. I didn't want to write a catalog of Christian teachings. I just wanted to give people a sense of Jesus that may have been lost. Like some people say to me, well, you don't have Jesus saying that people have to accept him as the Savior. They have to commit their lives to him as the Savior. You never come out and say that he is necessary for our salvation. You never come out and say that just precisely who he is. And I didn't intend to. People also say that, well, you didn't teach that Jesus is also going to be the judge at the end of the world, mm-hmm. and going to condemn people to hell. Mm-hmm. And my response to that is, well, all of us have had so much of a heavy dose of the vindictive, punishing God, that I felt that we needed, so many, many, many people are hurting so deeply that we desperately need to find the other side of God, the compassionate God that Jesus talked about in the prodigal son and so many other parables in the Gospels. And so I intentionally emphasized the compassionate Christ. Not that I try to negate Christ the judge, but I felt that no matter, even if I emphasized the compassionate Christ a little bit too much, it still wouldn't offset the damage that's been done to so many, many people by having been singed and burnt by, since childhood, frequently, being taught about this vindictive, frightening, punishing God.
You know, I found that particular viewpoint refreshing because in my role as a writer and talk show host, I, like you, run into so many people who have been victimized by that. My heart goes out to them. I feel they need to know the Jesus that you're talking about. Did this concept, did this feeling come from your parish experiences? Is this a reaction to what you felt was a negative perception people had of God?
Oh, yes, without a doubt. I've seen it so frequently during my life as a priest.
A couple of statements made in the books. Let's look first of all at the book Joshua, the original of the two. Quote, "Time is an illusion. The human mind invents the past." What is he trying to tell us?
It's hard for me to remember just what the setting is for that. I think he was just talking about the tricks that our minds play on us, and what he was trying to. I don't remember the exact setting for that, Bob, to be honest.
Well, let me throw another one at you here, because this one may be a little more easier to answer. Page 89. Priests are meant to serve, not rule. What are you trying to say there? Are you trying to suggest that ecclesiastical authority has maybe sought to entrench itself for its own longevity, not necessarily for the benefit of the laity?
Well, I think this is what happens. You know, I think one of the things I've noticed, and I've even noticed it more after I wrote the book, because I get a lot of invitations to speak to all different denominations. And one of the things I noticed is that very, very frequently, not in all cases, not even in the majority of cases perhaps, but very, very frequently, there is an unhealthy kind of person attracted to the ranks of clergy, a kind of person who may have a self-righteous bent, who gets a kick out of imposing moral concepts and moral laws upon other people. A certain self-righteous kind of people, sort of pharisaical kind of people, I think, frequently can be attracted to the ranks of the clergy. And I see that all across the board in the Catholic Church, and I see it in all the different denominations. And so this is what I was driving at. There are some people who use the church as their chosen field of politics, or as their way of lording it over people and getting a high place in society and getting the respect and the status in society that they might not get otherwise. And they use that for themselves rather than to help people. And I think this is what Jesus was talking about when he tried to teach the apostles a whole new concept of authority. They were arguing among themselves who was the greatest. And Jesus said to them, the important people of this world love to lord it over their subjects and make their importance felt. It cannot be that way with yourselves. Whoever wants to be first among you must be willing to be the servant of all the rest. So Jesus was trying to teach a concept of authority based upon service of one another. And that's a concept that has never been popular among clergy.
One of the things I enjoyed about your books is the way that the miracles of Christ occur in a kind of natural way. I think we've all been kind of Cecil B. DeMilleized, to coin a term. I mean, we see the Ten Commandments, and there's Moses standing there, and the waters party, and we the orchestra is crescendoing, and the violins are playing, and it seems like every time we see some depiction of Christ performing a miracle in the media, particularly on the silver screen, there's always this kind of aura of majesty. And in Joshua, I mean, he raises a boy from the dead, he calms the seas, he even heals a cardinal. Yeah. It all seems like kind of a very natural thing. It doesn't at all seem like a miracle, not like what we think of as miracles.
Well, I think that's the way Jesus was in his own life. He went about doing good. He comes across somebody that needs help, he touches them and heals them. Very casually. Jesus never made a big thing out of the healings that he performed. And I think that's what I tried to do in Joshua, is let everything be very casual and very low-key, as if it was just an ordinary part of Jesus' way of doing things.
Let me ask you what may be a controversial question, and you can not answer it if you don't want to. Let's suppose that the Joshua of your books had been in a Baton Rouge congregation February 1988, watching tears stream down the cheeks of Jimmy Swaggart, or in a Charlotte, North Carolina courtroom in November of 1989, watching the proceedings. Would you dare to venture a contemporaneous guess as to what he might have said or done?
It's hard to say, Bob. I feel sorry for Jimmy Swaggart and for Baker. I think they may have started out being very sincere, but may have just slipped along the way. For me to think what Joshua would say, what Jesus, haven't been able to do that myself personally, so I feel bad. I don't like to see things like that happening to religious leaders because it damages people.
I guess maybe what I'm getting at is that part of the message of your book seems to say that when we get away from the simplicity of the love of Christ just being handed from one human being to another, when we institutionalize it, when we glamorize it, when we give it the kind of megalomania that we do to these people. In fact, you were very kind in your assertions to be very general, very generic in what you did, but it just seems that religion has a way of getting out of hand.
It does, yeah. That's the problem.
How do we avoid that? How do we keep that from happening?
I don't know. That's a very difficult thing. I think one of the ways it can be done is by helping people to realize, to preserve their purity of their intentions. What I mean by that is, a lot of times people will get involved in religion to satisfy personal needs rather than to give themselves to God. They'll get involved in their parish, they'll get involved in their organization, in their church, because they're bored, because they're having problems at home, because they have a need to be in charge, they have a need to be an organizer, and they see in the church a chance to fill these needs. That they're the wrong motives, they're the wrong reasons. And I think this is what happens a lot of times in churches and parishes, is that people use the church as a way of solving their own or fulfilling their own needs. What happens then is that when anybody threatens those needs, then the fights start, and then the rules are made, and then someone has to lay the law down. And there's tensions, and I think this is what happens a lot. I think if people try to preserve a purity of intention, a purity of motives, and why they become involved in religion, and they're continually analyzing their motives. Why am I doing this? Why am I here? I think you can avoid a lot of the complications.
This is the end of Side 1. Please turn the cassette over at this point for the continuation of the message on Side 2.
Now, Paul told Timothy that we should give heed to doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness.
Right.
And I know that you're not suggesting that all of that be avoided, but what your book seemed to say is that in the process of doing all of that, we tend to get it out of hand. We get into this codified kind of approach to God. Maybe the secret is he said do it with all long suffering. Maybe that's what we're not doing. How do we keep this balance between the necessity of the objectified standards of religion, of doctrine and dogma, which are important to all of us to maintain rigidity of belief, and yet not lose the spirit because we're so concerned about the letter? Any thoughts on how we accomplish that?
I think the bottom line, Bob, is focus our attention on Christ himself and not on religion. And I think this is one of the things we don't do. Doctrine, Paul may talk about doctrine. Jesus didn't teach doctrine. He taught a vision of life. He taught a beautiful way of life, which we refer to as doctrine. I think the better way of doing it is to develop a sense of closeness to Jesus, an intimacy with Jesus, get to understand, to know, to feel the way Jesus thinks, the way Jesus feels about things, to love the things that Jesus loves. Gradually, over a period of time, become so identified with Jesus that you think and feel just the way he does. And that becomes a part of your life, becomes part of the fabric of your life. And doing that, Jesus becomes the focus of your whole life experience. And you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls that are involved in just being part of the structure of religion with all the concepts that go along with it.
I think anytime I read a book, maybe other folks are the same way, there's always a line somewhere that kind of grabs me. It just jumps out at me, and I say, this is what the man's really trying to say. And in your case, Joshua and the children, there was a line on page 97 in which you have Joshua, who is Jesus, saying, hatred is paralyzed in the presence of love. I mean, it's so simple, and that's really what it all says. Now I want to ask you this. Before talking with you today on my talk show, I had a call from a young man actually involved in Satanism and has participated in blood ceremonies. He's broken the law. He's been arrested. He's been on probation. A kid whose mother was illegitimately pregnant at 15 by a father he never knew, whose mother at 6 years of age caused him to have 30 stitches and broke his arm throwing him down the stairs. I mean, the story, Father Girzone, goes on and on and on, and it gets worse from that. The kid, and I tried talking to this young man about love, and he kept coming back to me, not angrily, but just with a life experience totally devoid of love. And so I read your statement. Hatred is paralyzed in the presence of love. And I asked myself, well, what would this Joshua of your books do or say to this young man? I felt so helpless. You try to talk to someone about love to paralyze the hate to someone whose life experience knows no love.
Yeah.
Reflect on that for a moment. How we do that, because there are, and I'm sure you've met them, so many people in our society, maybe unlike you or I, who have had affirming backgrounds to some extent, who have no sense of what love is. So how do you paralyze the hate?
That's tough for people like that because they have nothing to counter it. And I think this is why we have people that get involved with the devil, because the devil becomes very real when you've never found love. And I think the way to bring people away from the devil is by learning to show care and love for those individuals. And then you gradually diffuse their whole attachment to this evil world. I think that's the bottom line. When you come across people like that, your heart goes out to them. The first thing you want to do is just give them a hug. They wouldn't even trust a hug because they don't know what real love is, and they would be afraid of it. But I think over a period of time, if they could be convinced that a person's caring for them is genuine and sincere, then I think it could gradually draw them away from the evil that's become a part of their life.
You know, one of the major tenets of Satanism is that you don't do goodness or kindness to, quote, ingrates who don't deserve it. How can we get back to some kind of a society that really understands the ethic of Jesus, that comes across so strongly in your book, that we're kind to those who are miserable. We heal wounds where we find hurts. We work for peace where there is no peace. We give of ourselves when there is no giving back. This is what I see this Joshua constantly trying to accomplish in the face of all this opposition. How can our society ever get back to that? Where do all of us begin to be Joshuas wherever we are?
I think the bottom line is, when you do good, never look for a response. And I think this is one of the big things. We've been conditioned when we do something nice to get something from it, to get some kind of response from it. And when we don't, we get hurt. I think what we have to do is just be good, do good things, be Christ to people, and not look for a response, and just keep giving, even when there is no response. That was a beautiful thing about Jesus. And I think another thing, too, is if Christians could learn to really love one another and not be just the ordinary, mediocre kind of people that we are. If we could really learn to love one another in an unselfish way and not look for anything in return, not even look for a thank you in return, but just let that become a part of our personalities, just to be loving, caring people, then we could change the world. But we're not that way. We're vindictive, we're spiteful. Joshua and the children, the basic message there is forgiveness. That was one of the beautiful things that Jesus taught, forgiveness. And it wasn't a commandment that he was trying to impose on us, an unreasonable command or an unreasonable burden. He wasn't that way. What he was trying to do was give us the key to inner peace. Not just forgive, but don't even allow yourself to take offense.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can get ourselves to do that, try to understand what prompts a person to do the strange and hurtful things they do, then we won't take offense. And then if we don't take offense, there's no need even to forgive. And I think this is what we need. It's the key to peace that Jesus was trying to give us. You see it in Jesus' life so often. His enemies, the scribes and the Pharisees, they were continually plotting against him. They were in every crowd that he spoke to, jotting down things that he said so that they could accuse him of some indictable offense. Then the next day they have the nerve to invite him to their house for dinner, and he'd invariably go.
Yeah. You and I wouldn't go. You'd say, "You suckers, I'm not coming to your place. I saw what you were doing."
Oh yeah, but Jesus seemed to be almost totally incapable of taking offense.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally did him in, and he's hanging on the cross with the nails in his hands, hanging there, dying. Father, forgive them. They don't realize what they've done. So he practiced that message. He seems almost incapable of taking offense because he understood so perfectly why people did the terrible things they did. And that's what we have to learn to imitate as his followers. Not to take offense. And if we could be that way, if we could really love sincerely and not look for any return, and if we could get ourselves to the point where we don't take offense, I think then you could heal a lot of the wounds that the world is suffering.
Retrospection is always much easier than foresight. If I were in your position now, I suppose I could look at the transition of your life over the last decade and say, oh, now I understand God. But surely there must have been times when you were forced because of your health problems to kind of be set aside, and surely you must have felt called by God. Were there not times that you felt, God, are you setting me in the shelf? What's going on? I dedicated my life to you. I've studied. I mean, you are heavily degreed. You are a brilliant man, well taught, and you had a certain stature, and now all of a sudden you're sitting over here as a kind of nobody doing nothing. Were there not times you said, why me, God?
I've always felt that way, Bob. I've always felt that God kept himself at a distance from me. It's been a burden, it's been a cross I've carried all my life. When I was a young child, when I was in the seminary, I went to the seminary when I was 14, and I had a beautiful, beautiful relationship with Christ in those days. I could spend hours in prayer each day and really feel I was close to Christ. But I went through a terrible crisis right after that, and the whole bottom fell out of everything. I went through the most horrible period of depression that lasted for 12 years, and with no relief, not even a day. And the only thought that crossed my mind in the morning was, oh my God, not another day. I couldn't feel there was a God. Ever since that time, I've never been able to have the same feeling of closeness to God that I had when I was young. And yet I always was trying to do what I felt God wanted me to do. I know he's there. I know he's guiding me. I know he's prompting me. He uses me to touch a lot of people's lives. But I've never had the feeling of closeness to him like I used to have when I was a kid. That's been a terrible, terrible burden. Terrible burden. It's almost impossible to pray because of that. But it's so I know what you're talking about. And it's a terrible cross to have to carry. But you do feel as if God just puts you aside on the shelf. But I always have the feeling that, well, God knows what he's doing, and maybe this is intentional. Maybe he wants to hide this part from me so that, he can keep me, where he wants me to be without getting a big head over things.
We say very glibly, no pain, no gain. Christ taught that if a seed doesn't die and fall into the ground, that it can't give forth life. Seems to me what you've personally reflected on and what the Joshua of your books reflects on is this suffering or denial ethic, this ethic of humility that is so contrary to our narcissistic looking out for number one society. Do you feel in any sense that your books have really tapped into a spiritual vacuum, that there really is a hunger in the part of people in this incredibly materialistic age to kind of get back to that self-sacrifice?
People are really hungering for the spiritual. People don't want religion, they want God. People don't want the trappings of religion, they want God. They want a deep relationship with God. They want a God that's going to fill the hunger in their souls. And that can't be done just through religion. We have to be able to introduce people to God. And I think I think you hit it right on the head. People are really hurting, and they really are looking for spirituality.
With all due respects to the integrity of you as a writer, it's never a good thing to give away the end of a movie or the end of a book, and I won't do that. But in Joshua and the Children, there is what is to me a rather surprising ending. I mean, we are accustomed to seeing Jesus in the paintings of the Ascension. You know, there's this. These halos over the heads of the apostles standing around, and he's up there in the middle of the air floating on the crowd, and the angels are there. Your Joshua does not end up like that in the book. It is a tragic kind of ending. Why? Why did you do that?
To show if our hatred under the guise of religion is allowed to take its logical course, that's what we would end up doing to him.
We'd kill Jesus again.
Sure we would.
We'd crucify him again. Have we not learned anything in 2,000 years of religious teaching, millions of sermons? Have we not learned anything about who? Are you trying to tell us through Joshua that after 2,000 years we really don't know who God is in Christ?
That's the bottom line. I'm convinced of it, Bob. We get hung up on religion. I'll give you an example. This old German lady said to me one day, she said, "Father, the way I size up religion, Catholics worship the church, Protestants worship the Bible, and there's damn few that ever get to know Christ." You know? That's the bottom line. If Christ were to come back, you know, with all of our hang-ups about different things, he could get in the way of our little pet prejudices.
And yet the remarkable thing about your book, I mean, you've had some people name their babies after the title of the book. You've even had a guy rename his hotel after you. Right, yeah. You've had some fascinating things happen. This has obviously touched an incredibly responsive chord in the hearts of people, and not all of them Christians.
I know, it's amazing.
Why?
Jewish people, Hindu people, Chinese people. There's we just signed a contract for a Korean translation. It's amazing the way it seems. I think the way to look at it is this, Bob. We preach religion. Jesus was God. He knew it was in the human heart. He knew what human beings needed to find peace and to find God. So what Jesus taught was the universal solution, the universal fulfillment of human need. And when you, again, teach what Jesus taught, the whole world responds to it. When you substitute a denomination in place of that, people get indigestion on it.
You know, as a writer, Father Girzone, I'm accustomed to dealing with acquisition committees, marketing committees. My goodness, publishers have this thing down to a science. It's amazing to me, though, what your book did. I mean, you had none of this. It, in a sense, the phenomenon of your books flaunts every well-known rule of the publishing industry. It's like what Christ came to do: flaunt all the rules and say, here is God. Do you still have a sense of wonder about how all of this came into being?
Oh, yeah, that's why I can never get a swelled head over it. I know that my style is extremely simple. I'm not a writer. And my work certainly isn't a grand piece of literature. And this is a phenomenon, how the book like that could have taken off and touched so many people's lives when it's so simple.
There, I'm sure, have been some very legalistic critics who have come your way.
Oh, yeah.
What's the most unkind thing they've said to you? What's the most cruel charge and accusation they've made?
It's hard to tell. I don't. Well, one fellow, when he interviewed me on the radio once, his first question was, he said, "I read your book. I didn't like it." He said, "How come your book was so poorly written?"
Oh.
My answer to that was, I said, when I first started to write the book, I started to write it in a nice style so I could get a reputation of being a literary figure. And I said to myself, if I write like that, who's going to read it? Other than literary critics. And I said, I wanted everybody to write this book, to read this book. So I decided to write the book as simply as I could, so that the style could be like a pane of glass and not of sunlight.
Is there anything you wanted Joshua to say in these books, reflecting back on it? Any words you wish you could have put in his mouth that you didn't think of at the time?
Not really. No, I had a funny feeling when I was writing the book that I really wasn't writing it. And then after it was over, I never even bothered analyzing it.
But you got a B.A. in philosophy from St. Bonaventure University.
Yeah.
I mean, you studied theology. You've been a priest for more than 30 years. How in the world did you get all of that out of the way? How did you get beyond all of that? Because surely, like all of us, that clutters up our minds. To me, that's the miracle of the book, who you are, what your background is, that it came out with such simplicity. How did you get beyond all of that?
That's a mystery. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know, because, you know the way we were all taught in the seminary, and we were all taught in complicated concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And you certainly couldn't use probably what I've been searching for all my life is a way to make sense out of Jesus' teachings and to find a Jesus that made sense.
Hmm.
And then I probably all just came together after, being in religion for so long. I don't know. That's hard to figure out.
Before we conclude, in just a few words, the Joshua Jesus of the book, of both books, for the people who have not read it and for the people who should read these books and meet him and be introduced to him, when they turn the pages, as they pore over them, who are they going to meet?
Hopefully they'll meet Jesus and fall in love with him. Even little children, that's one of the biggest thrills. Little kids read the book. And they'll call me up every now and then and say, "Are you the one that wrote Joshua?" And I'll say, "Yes." And they'll say, "Oh, thank you. I read Joshua and I fell in love with Jesus."
Who is this Jesus they're going to fall in love with?
Hopefully the Jesus that's real. And the Jesus that can love them in return. And the Jesus who can make them realize that their life was not a mistake, but that they were made by God with a lot of tender love and care, and that they are very precious and very special to God, and God loves them as they are. And God's patient, even though everybody else is trying to make them into what they can feel comfortable with. God's the only one who knows that it's going to take a lifetime before they're going to grow to become what he wanted them, intended them to become. It's not going to happen overnight. Only God has the patience to let us grow over a lifetime to be what he wants us to be. And he loves us at every phase of our life, with all of our imperfections, all of our limitations. Loves us every step of the way.
The books are called Joshua and Joshua and the Children, published by Macmillan. They're a phenomenon, but then he was too, 2,000 years ago, and he is again. Father Joseph Girzone, thank you so much for joining us.
This is the end of the message. For further information regarding other topics available on cassette and in printed form, write Bob Larson Ministries, Box 36A, Denver, Colorado, 80236.